All right, welcome to our Monday Circle of Being Fourth Way Non-Duality gathering. And we are going to start with an important topic that we delayed for a long time, but it is very essential, practical topic pertaining to our psychology that we are going to tackle today in a little presentation with me and Peter. And then we will continue with questions and also questions or shares about your work or your readings. And I guess one important thing I would like to say to remember yourself as often as you can during this meeting, whatever that looks like to you. Remembering yourself as a way to diminish this state of torpor, and for all of us it manifests as checking out. Although you are interested, you're checking out, so kind of you can even mark for yourself whenever you catch yourself in some other timeline to bring yourself back and to have this ongoing sense of being aware of the phenomenal now, both the outside and the inside. Or if it is accessible to you, be aware of the sense of your own existing. And it is useful to look at awareness more as rather than a something, but the activity of being aware. Even the self, not as a something, but remembering to shine the light of awareness on the activity of being aware. And for this particular topic, it's important to remind us some of the fourth way principles about hearing is to be open and to notice the tendency of the mind to dispute or refute or disagree or somehow feel like it doesn't apply to you. Be open, but you don't have to believe anything. And try to see how these things that we're going to share today apply to you and to all your friends and your family. And the topic we are going to tackle is this idea of features or chief features, which is a part of the psychology aspect of the system. And I'm going to have Peter start here.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again. Yes, this is good timing because you are now pretty familiar with a lot of fundamental ideas about the centers and about the imaginary picture of oneself, this feeling of I, and what is behind that, and about all these obstacles we've talked about. That's what the fourth way calls them, obstacles. They can be seen as, they can be called different things. The word obstacles, though, is the one most often used. And that all of these things are in us. Yes, these eyes, the centers, the way they manifest, these obstacles. There are no external obstacles to awakening. Isn't that interesting? None. No external obstacles to awakening. They are all internal. And they are primarily imaginary, which is also very interesting. I know I use that word a lot. It's hard to find another word for interesting. In fact, we used to have that as a word exercise many years ago, interesting. We should try that maybe again. Anyway, the idea is about features. It is this, that, and by the way, this term chief feature is also sometimes called chief weakness or chief fault. And commonly you hear chief feature. I happen to prefer the word chief fault, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the idea is that all of these aspects of our mechanicality, all of these obstacles, all of the many eyes, how the centers manifest, they are all essentially spokes in the wheel. And as Uspensky pointed out, chief feature is akin to the axle at the center around which the wheel turns. All of these things come together, or you could say they all are a manifestation of this central axle, this hub. And that this is where our imaginary picture of I stems from. And what we're going to describe is the outermost layer primarily today. In other words, chief feature manifests in us in our behavior, through our behavior. And we can start watching it or watching for it in terms of how it is visible, how it manifests visibly in our behavior and in the behavior of other people. And from there, we can turn inside and go deeper and start examining the psychology behind this, and then penetrate even more deeply to this feeling of I beneath the psychological operations of these chief feature. Before I start anything specific, I'll also say that Gurdjieff went so far as to say that each person's chief weakness or chief feature or chief fault, that their work in this area constituted their own personal path. We are all talking about the fourth way. This is a way of awakening, a path, you could say. And yet it's individual. And this work on chief feature is where it becomes highly individual and specific. The reason I said I preferred the word chief fault is because the word fault, you usually think, well, you have a fault. You did something wrong, a fault. Yes, you made a fault in a track meet or something. But a fault is also a gap, a crevice, a crack. If you think of San Andreas fault, the San Andreas fault, it's a crack in the earth, a fissure in the earth. And this is what we have in our psychology. We each have a tendency to fall into this crack psychologically. And it begins, we are born with a physiological tendency. It's physiological, it's in essence. We're born with it. And this physiological tendency or urge, which is highly mechanical, it becomes the root for the psychological development of a sense of identity. For example, you see, I enjoy the example of a schoolyard with children. You see young kids on the playground at recess. Some are out in the middle, calling attention to themselves. They're naturally braggadocious at a young age. No one's taught them to do this. They are naturally this way. Just as there's the child off in the corner who doesn't want to be with the group, doesn't want to be visible, prefers to be isolated, feels safer in that context. This is an instinctive physiological tendency that will later in life become their psychological basis for imagining themselves as me. I can never go to the center of the playground. I can never garner attention. I don't want to start a fight. There are others who are starting fights. There are others who are garnering attention. Some kids naturally boss others around, and we'll be touching on these different features. But these grow psychologically, become stronger, become the foundation of our imaginary picture of ourselves, and as a feeling of I. Couple of key points, and you can read about this. These are in the books, In Search of the Miraculous, The Fourth Way, some other books, particularly by Uspensky, other books. One is the idea that this chief fault, where we fall in, he said we always fall in at the same place. He pointed out that there are certain things that we cannot resist mechanically. We just can't resist. Other people can resist things we cannot resist. And then other people can't resist things that we can resist. So it's hard to compare each other's chief feature. One person can't resist talking. They get in a group of people, they cannot resist the urge to jump in quickly with their opinion and start talking. This is something, it's a manifestation of a feature. It's the external manifestation of a chief feature. Another person cannot resist the urge and the tendency to shut up, to go to the corner and never say, and they have lots of thoughts, they may have good opinions, will not express them, cannot express them. Their resistance is to expressing what they actually think. Another person can't resist having the last word. Another person can't resist knowing everything, always having something to say on everything, as though they are the expert. Another person can't resist the tendency to make everything a bargain. Their life becomes a bargain. Everything's a bargain, exchange, getting a deal, making a deal, getting the best advantage for me. Life becomes a bargain. It's about bargaining. All of life, that's what their life becomes. Saving money, earning money, making money, watching their money. Some people can't resist that. The list goes on, and we'll be touching on different things. This is a fascinating area to study on the one hand, but I want to point out we are talking about the external manifestation, the very surface layer of how our sense of identity manifests visibly in the world and particularly in relation to other people. And this is just the surface, and we're going to go just the tip of the iceberg, what we see in terms of behavior. Another way to think of this is, I mentioned a couple examples. Another way to think of it is, what are you most a slave to? What when it happens, do you just you become a slave to it right away? So it's very fast. This is a lightning fast reflex in our psychology. It's so fast that we don't see it. We are in it. It's not something we have, it's something we are actually in our core of our mechanics. If we're not remembering ourselves to some extent, it's pretty much a guarantee we are manifesting in, we're lodged in our chief feature to some extent. It's almost a mechanical substitute for the identity of awareness, of awareness. There has to be something there. And if awareness is not there, this does the job on a mechanical level. What are you a slave to? Are you a slave to money? Are you a slave to food? Are you a slave to control? Are you a slave to resistance? Some people, anything happens, they immediately resist. Their life is about resisting. Are you a slave to criticizing other people? Can you not resist that urge to criticize other people, not only behind their back, but to their face? Find a little criticism to slip in there. You know, you'd be okay, Betty, if you didn't slouch in the chair like that, you bum. Some people do this. They talk like this to people. They just can't resist that urge. They fall in, they become a slave to criticizing others. Why? Of course, to make themselves feel legitimate. And criticizing other people's mechanicality, just as judging other people's mechanicality, is a form of this defense mechanism. Mihai, before I go into any more specifics, maybe I'm sure I prompted some things that you might want to add in at this point.
Yeah, so we are going to in the system. There are a bunch of very clearly defined features that we are going to discuss. They are associated with type or associated with certain upbringing, that they're very common. You'll recognize them. But at the general level, the idea is that when we are not remembering ourselves, when we are asleep and identify, we are operating in relation to all our relations, relation to ourselves with the world, from that, like a pattern of identity, a pattern of being in the world. So chief feature is where chief feature is the corner, not the cornerstone, but the main pillar of our false personality. Chief feature is the core pillar of our false personality, as being the imagined me. And when we are operating from that, this, as Peter says, very fast, and it's involuntary. Basically, it's involuntary. You will see, as you start to know your feature and you try to remember yourself and resist it, meaning not go along with it, it is very hard. It requires a lot of data and factors to be able to resist it. It is where we are most asleep. And some features can be very visible to others. Actually, that's what Gurdjieff was saying. That's interesting. It is easier to see other people's features. You see them, everybody knows that. And the person will deny it, will say, no, it's not true. But it's easier to see other people because these are kind of loud manifestations. So actually, it is helpful to be open to our friends and stuff when they are, find faulting, or they are sharing something about us, even if they are not skillful, or they may have criticism or some edge into it. A skillful fourth way practitioner will kind of not take it personally, but there's some kernel of truth in that. Some of them are active and loud, you can see it. Some of them are inside and you can't see it. And everybody has a combination of, like, maybe one, let's say one or two chief features, and then a few other side ones. So part of knowing ourselves at the level of the imaginary me is to get help to identify your chief feature. And then the work is, we'll talk more about what the work is a little later, but let's go into actual, maybe you were planning to go into outlining some of them and specifics.
Sure. And I want to say too, you mentioned earlier, Gurdjieff called this just to keep in mind, this can be an unpleasant topic, of course, because it goes to the core of our feeling of ourselves, and suddenly it's being exposed as this is what consciousness is not. This is our sense of identity, and in the centers, in our functioning as a human being. This is not consciousness. And this is also part of the fourth way, is it's an in-depth exploration of who we are not, what we are not. And nevertheless, to keep in mind, we are not, when we oftentimes will try to tell somebody else or pinpoint somebody else's chief feature, but it's not the root of it. We're seeing surface. So bear in mind, if someone else offers you a photograph, a suggestion about a feature, they are photographing what is visible. And it may be active or it may be passive. It's what's visible. And it takes a lot of experience and also self-knowledge of one's own to understand what's behind this visible manifestation. And it's up to each of us to do that, further delving down into the other layers of this. And we're not trying to, we're not trying to control our chief feature. Let's put it that way. We're trying to observe it. And part of observing it is resisting its external manifestation. Let's say I have an urge to, when my wife's talking, to interrupt her and tell her, would you please stop that? That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. Don't you ever listen to me? Or something like this, yes? To keep my mouth shut would be to resist the urge, control the external manifestation. And then it's my work to look inside and see where's that coming from? Who's that talking? It's akin to the expression of negative emotions. We try not to express them, which is their external manifestation. We try to control their external manifestation for the purpose of looking deeper below, beneath them, underneath, to see what's going on in there. Yes, what Mihai was saying, there are types, there are features associated with body types. And we haven't talked about body types. And we're not going to tonight, but we felt it wasn't absolutely necessary to do that first. But we can sort of start with some of the classic features. One, of course, is vanity. And this means essentially self-preoccupation, over concern with me. Everything's about me. The world is against me. It's me. Yes. Regardless of a person's chief feature, they may have a chief feature of vanity. And usually the feature of vanity is the feature that is most interested in wanting to know what its feature is. That can be a clue. But everyone is vain about their chief feature. This is curious. And of course, another way to explain chief feature, the psychology of it is, it always allows you to think that you're right, or that you're in the right. And this is part of this vanity of chief feature. No matter what you decide, how you choose to do things, you're making the right decision. You're right. But that vanity we can talk about a lot because it has a positive and a negative half. Gurdjieff talked about this a lot, self-pride and vanity, I think was the other way he said it. And it can have a positive and a negative dimension. You can think very highly of yourself. Imagine yourself as a wonderful, perfect person, gets everything accomplished, responsible, respectable, good-looking, the whole package, right? The whole complete package can be wonderful in your imaginary idea of yourself. And on the other hand, it can be quite negative. I never managed to meet up to the standards. I'm not good enough. I always fall short. I am a bum. I do slouch in my chair a lot. I am actually a bum probably, and so on. It's this self-deprecatory, it's the negative form of self-preoccupation is what that is, as opposed to a positive form of self-preoccupation. And they are exactly the same. This is what can be hard to fathom at first. Exactly the same thing, but in positive and negative form. The other thing about vanity is everyone experiences the positive and the negative half of vanity. The person who's on stage or at the party or in front of the room feels so wonderful, is exuding confidence, etc. Party's over, they close the door, they go back in their bedroom. Why did I say that? Oh no, they think, well, why did I, oh God, I'm not going to do that again. I can't, who am I? Now the negative half kicks in. Self-doubt is a dimension of vanity. Again, it's multi-layered, multifaceted, but this is this thing. It's me. Everything's pointing to me. Everything's about me in relation to me. I'm the center of the universe, for better and for worse. I'm the center of the universe. You want to go to something else, Mihai? Do you have something to add there about?
Maybe we can bounce a little tennis on each one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the higher, the more intense version of that, it will be what is called narcissistic personality disorder, or histrionic personality. This is more like the enhanced, it's like so obvious, where it, so this is the higher end of the spectrum, where I only care about my image. It's about one's image and how one is perceived, and even there's this distorted image. Somebody will have an inflated sense of vanity, is like they perceive themselves in a wonderful way, and but as a more like regular range of vanity, there's this very strong, relentless pursuit to get attention, to be seen. Vanity feature wants to be seen, wants to be liked, wants to be considered wonderful, wants to be appreciated. once that they see me and they like me and they consider me. It can be vanity in various this vanity feature can be in different, we can have vanity around different aspects of our machine. We can have intellectual vanity about all that we know and how smart and quick we are, or how we are with languages or with poetry or something. Then we can have emotional vanity around feeling that we are sophisticated being and more developed and more refined, as well as all the other people. They are peasants and ignorant, and one can have vanity about one's body, or feeling that one is handsome, or having a great muscle, or having beautiful eyes. When I was a kid, my parents all the time everybody told me, oh, Mihai is so cute. Look at his eyelashes. They are so long, such a cute. So there's all the time this constant thing. And then I started to be like, yeah, man, it's like, so vanity about one's looks, one's appearance, vanity around one's technical abilities. One can be a very handy person, very about sports and all of that. So anyway, it takes all these forms. Look at me, how a great tennis player I am, or how suave I move, or can be vanity around being a lover, being a sexual person who is a very accomplished lover, and all the women are very pleased. And so there can be vanity in any and all of these things. They can come sometimes with some sort of arrogance. Being arrogant, feeling that I know better and I am better. I'm better, I know better. And
We're also always we're easily irritated by other people's vanity.
Yes.
This is vanity. And we notice it in others quickly. And as Mihai is saying, it can manifest through each of the centers in a different way. Through each of the centers of gravity, will be vain about their center of gravity. And there's nothing more irritating than somebody else who's vain.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Says vanity. Well said by vanity.
When I was younger, or even now, I can see when somebody had the similar type and similar features with me, and it was like really repellent, and I could see they're full of shit and they're full of themselves, and it's like but this is like the shadow principle, that we are seeing in others what we fail to see in ourselves. Also, vanity likes to hide that it has vanity. Vanity doesn't like people say, oh man, you're vain. It's like, no. So vanity wants to work on its vanity in order to be really seen as perfect. So remember that Benjamin Franklin was talking about in his autobiography, which he was very honest about inner work. He had a whole list of working on all the vices and all kind of weaknesses, and he said the most difficult one was vanity for him, because he noticed that even when he was trying to do it, to diminish his vanity and his self-pride, and secretly in the back of the mind there was vanity trying to appear even more special.
Yes, he said he was proud, working on his pride.
Yeah.
A good observation, yes.
Vanity will tend to like to be in a center of attention in some way, with what he knows, with a performance, with
it's also afraid of failure.
Hmm.
Sometimes vanity will not perform because it's afraid of failing, and it's afraid that if it fails, it will be judged, it will be belittled, it will be less than perfect, and therefore it cannot take that chance. This is true in business. This is true in athletics, in performances, performing. Any public demonstration of one's abilities the person will freeze because they can't bear the notion of failure. This is vanity.
There's less interest in other people. Basically, it's very much interested in oneself, and it's not really interested in other people there, to know them, to understand how they think. And in conversation, it will often kind of ping pong it back to oneself, and So a very difficult exercise for vanity is to refrain from talking about oneself. This is like suicide for vanity. It's very hard to do. And as Peter said, now there is the other side, the dark side of vanity that can be, but it's still all about me, but there's this kind of self-pity and self-deprecation, where this is what clinically would be this strong deficiency story about oneself, not good enough, not, yeah, not worthy, not enough, something wrong with me.
Also, the obstacles that we talk about that we've mentioned at length at different times, they each are an obstacle in relation to chief feature. Therefore, vanity will experience inner considering one way, not the way that other features will experience inner considering. And this is why it is so helpful to be specific. What are we experiencing, for example, when we inner consider? What are we experiencing when we feel the urge to talk or not to talk? Why are we lying? When you know about chief feature and you can start tracing things back to this axle, all of these things are connected to this axle at the center of the wheel. And therefore, the manifestation internally and then the external manifestation of the feature will be, you could say, processed differently through these various forms of identification, imagination, inner considering, talking, lying, and negative emotions. Guess who makes the decision in us to express a negative emotion? Guess where the logic of the negative emotion is built? Guess where it is initially generated in raw form, in raw material, so as to be able to become a psychological entity and so on. This is, where is it? It's chief feature usually. This is why a person with one feature will express anger one way, and a person with another chief feature will express anger in a different way. It's anger, it's still this negative energy coming out, the manifestation, but the root, the source can be quite different. And this is why our work has to be personal. We have to observe these things in ourselves.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, it's an interesting exercise as you are listening this thing to maybe whenever you put with a star or two stars, when you hear some of this tendency that you're like, oh, I definitely have that. Oh, I don't have that. So you can even use that as a little reference to make it more practical. And in the system, in the fourth way, the idea is that vanity could be a chief feature, or even if it's not, it's very likely that vanity can be a secondary feature connected to other features. So vanity is very common. We can move on unless you have something else.
No, I did have something else, but if it comes back, I'll mention it. It's not coming back right now. Another common feature is what is called, oh, I know what I was going to say. Thank you. I was going to say that chief feature is also what decides in us at lightning speed how to respond to pressure and how to respond to suffering. A little bit of friction, a little bit of what we call denying force when you meet some kind of impediment to your momentum. A little bit of pressure or a lot of pressure. A person, you can watch a person snap, and they're snapping, they're falling into this fault, this crack in their psychology. They become a slave to it. It's their protection, and it's their go-to negative emotion. It's their go-to behavior. It's withdrawal, perhaps. Chief, we're talking vanity. Something happens, and there's an urge either to, oh, I want to get on stage right now. Ooh. It feels like that. Doesn't say that, but that's the urge, the ooh. Or it's, I hope they don't call on me. Because I'm afraid I'll fail, afraid I won't succeed, afraid I'll look bad. And it quickly decides how to handle pressure. in the face of pressure. And of course, our life is filled with different little and large pressures all the time, every day, every month, every year. Life it's a pressure cooker in many ways, our life, human life. And the referee for us psychologically is chief feature. It's what's back there. The idea that man cannot do is a big idea in the fourth way. We cannot do anything. And it's chief feature that's doing everything in the appearance of having control, but it's an automatic kind of control. And it's either pushing or pulling or resisting reality, pushing or resisting our life and our suffering and our friction. The other thing I was going to move on to the feature of power. This is another common, well-known, very visible feature. And it's an active, usually of an active form, but it can be passive also. What's called passive resistance is really, it's a form of passive power. And outwardly, of course, power manifests as bossing people around, barging into the room or barging into the conversation, barging into other people's business, telling other people what to do, being the boss, being bossy, being bitchy, this kind of thing. This is power. And it's when you go out of yourself and into, well, other people's business, other people's activities, other people's lives, with the notion that you could control them. And it's about control. Power is often about control in some manner, active or passive. Mihai?
Yeah. Yeah, intimidating, being strong, interfering. There is this feature has a particular flavor of, yeah, getting out of people's business, trying to influence them directly or indirectly. It's praised in our society in some way, like strong leader and so on. Bullying, and it can take there are basic power. Let's say there are three types of power feature. One will be more like we call as a martial, more like a warrior, that you're going directly and blunt and straightforward, and people are shocked and hurt and telling people what to do, and on top of it, and it's kind of shameless. They don't feel bad about it. So there's one. Then there is another one, could be what is called mercurial power. I'm using these terms. These are fourth way terms, but at the same time, mercurial and martial, these are also in everyday language. So mercurial power, it's the same agenda to try to influence, to try to control, to try to have impact, to try to make happen, but it's coming indirectly. It comes as a manipulative, with a story, with a whole thing, indirect. It's not straightforward. It's the opposite of the straightforward. Trickery, smokescreen, this or that, but there's a whole activity still with the intention to control, to make happen, to interfere, to achieve a certain results, but comes indirectly, sneakily, from types that are, let's say, smaller type, even as size. And then there's a third one that Peter was mentioning about. This is a type that this is inside. There's more like, no, I'm not going to do this. No, doesn't apply to me. So it's a quiet push over life, resisting life. And it's kind of all a feeling that the whole life is pressing on me and other people. So the only way to my way of survive and be safe is to just be close to it and reject and push inwardly. This may not be easily recognized outwardly. And we need
That
to
relates to another feature it's the kind of also the inverse of power in the fourth way, as we were taught it. It's called willfulness. It's a form of stubbornness, but it's more than just resistance. It's insisting that things be done my way, on my terms. And there's a strong insistence about it that makes it powerful. Someone who, what's the expression? Now I can't remember it, of course. When someone, he's dug his heels in. Do you know this expression? You're trying to persuade someone or convince them, and they dig in their heels, meaning they're not going anywhere. They've established their position, their opinion, their point of view, their decision, and they are not going to budge. And this is willful. This is more often than not, passive types are prone to this because that's how they can be powerful. And oddly enough, this type of power can often win out over the more outright, direct, blunt, sort of attacking form of power because it's going to refuse to give up its position. And some people don't know what to. It's interesting when you see someone with an active form of power in contest with, in conflict with someone with this more passive, to watch this interaction at play. And there's another form too, where there's kind of a diplomatic, persuasive form of power. I'm going to charm you over in such a way that I'm going to get you to do what I want you to do. It's a little bit like the manipulative form, but it's not as tricky as that. It's strategic, it's still strategic, but it's a form of trying to get other people and trying to get circumstances to bend to what I want, kind of thing. Also, keep in mind, we all have all these features in us, just as we all have all the centers in us, but one or two is more predominant, and that's what we're talking about here. You'll recognize all these things in yourself as we describe them. And I promise you, if there were 20 other people or more familiar with this topic, were part of our conversation, they'd be bringing out all sorts of different examples than we are, all sorts of different facets of these. We're doing our best to cover as broad a base as we can. This is another area for observation. You learn these sort of fundamental principles about features, their general characteristics, and then use this for further and deeper observation.
Yeah, I guess we can touch at least on all of them a little bit. And another one is called dominance. And this is somehow there is a relative of power in a way that there's interest in control and having things in a certain way, and with the inner certainty that that is the right way and that I know. However, in its manifestation, dominance is more subtle. And dominance is not bossing people around, it's not telling them necessarily what to do. There is more like they are oozing a silent way of being that almost you want to follow what they are saying. There's some kind of the dominant people, they are kind of oozing some kind of inner authority or inner knowledge, even if they might not know anything about it, but people tend to follow them. Usually people that have dominance, they tend to be taller type, and actually a lot of leaders and all of that end up being taller types. But it's very much also manifests inwardly about controlling oneself. It can show into controlling oneself, trying to control one's behavior, trying to have it all very precise. It's always like a plan. They have this to have a plan, that it's all nothing unexpected. Things are precise, orchestrated, architectural. There is like how the right way things should be, and then they are interested. They can be interested more like unconscious types could be interested in having control over many people, but in a subtle, almost for their own good. Or they want to control themselves, and they can go away. They may tend going into self-denial, renunciation, various inner practices to achieve control over themselves. but the difference is there's more, one is less loud, less passive.
Also, you can feel the requirements oozing from someone with dominance. This is why you feel maybe I should do what they say or what they're implying, what I feel. As Mihai mentioned, there's a fear of losing control. This is a deeper layer of this feature. The surface layer, the visible component, is control, controlling oneself, controlling one's diet, controlling one's budget, controlling one's schedule, controlling other people, how they prepare the eggs, what they want. It's an imposition of my requirements onto you. Dominus will say, when I do that, what I do is I do it this way. In other words, you're not quite doing it the right way. The right way, I'll happen to tell you, is the way I do it. And here it is. And implying you should do this because this is the way you do it if you want to be in control. And there's a fear of losing control, though, in this feature. That's the psychological side. Just as in vanity, there's a fear of failure or a fear of not being accepted, not being lauded, praised, thought highly of. Just as with the willfulness, there is a fear of what might happen if I yield to reality, if I yield to circumstances, if I yield to someone else's will. There's a fear of giving up that type of control, which is a different type of control. And you can see this in each of the features. This is where you start to burrow down below the surface layer into this fear. Not only what are you a slave to, what can you not resist? Where do you always fall in automatically? But what are you afraid of? And this isn't easy to answer right away. We each have to go quite deep to see what it is we are afraid of. Another dimension of these features.
One last thing on dominance is that this desire to control, they end up that they're very much planning. Things are planned. It's all very clearly outlined. There's not much spontaneity.
And not much flexibility.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
inflexible psychologically. Sorry, yes.
It's like we say, hey, I decided it's the best course of action. They're not thinking like that, but it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And then even if the circumstances change, it feels like you have a very big ship. You can't change because we decide to do that. So this is what I decided to do. This inflexibility. And dominance has this, it's not that they are better, but this is the better way to go. This is the right way. This is
the superior way.
And dominance feature has this assumed incompetence of other people. Basically, they subconsciously believe that other people don't know. They just don't know. They are idiots. They just don't know, and it's annoying, especially when you know. I know a lot of these people.
I can remember with people I've worked with in the past with these ideas, and often we would have discussions about features. And of course, vanity hates to be seen as being vain, having the chief feature of vanity. Willfulness doesn't want to talk about it, of course. And dominance really, truly believes that, yes, I have dominance, but inherently it's a strength. To know well how to control yourself and what to do. And why isn't everybody else following my diet? Why isn't everybody else managing their money the way I do? Why? And so on. There's this inherent feeling of, and this goes back to this idea that each feature psychologically feels as a feeling of being right. No matter what, I'm always right in my position, in my point of view, in my attitude, my values. And again, dominance can manifest through each of the four centers. A person with dominance can say nothing. For example, a parent can just do this.
Oh, yeah.
Or, of course, they can say, Peter, did you do your homework? Have you done your homework? And then the look. Dominance often has this look after. They'll ask you a question or say something to you, and then they'll just look at you. And I've asked people who have dominance, strong dominance, when you do that, are you knowingly kind of looking at me as though you want me to agree? Or what's going on in you? They're not experiencing that. It's not what you imagine. They're dominating you. And it's a different process. But it can also manifest through the emotional center. Someone can try to dominate you, or you can try to dominate someone emotionally with your feelings, expecting them to understand you, expecting them to value you and respect you.
All right. It's interesting that the ones that we have, the features we mentioned initially were the features that are more like active features, meaning we're going to go another time, hopefully, that all the types, the type of machine we have, some types are more active, more driven, out there, busy, active, and some are more like passive. None of them is better from the point of view of awakening. It's just for the diversity of life. But what we talked so far was this vanity power feature, this direct, blunt power feature, manipulative power, this seductive power, willfulness, which is a passive feature, so to say. And then there's the dominance, that what we talked so far. And then the rest of them would be one very common one. It's fear feature, where basically one tends to, the world is scary, and one is all the time have thoughts, feelings around fear, and bad things that may happen. And so such people, actually, I know people like that, they are deeply interested in these ideas that we are talking now, and they are deeply contemplating on these things, but they can't, it's hard for them to come here because it's too intense to be with other people. So they tend to isolate and be more like inward and consumed in various types of fears of sorts. Another feature is what is called non-existence. Non-existence is that this kind of behavior where one is a very good listener, very empathetical and nourishing type, and so everybody now dumps all their problems on them, and they are listening empathetically, and somehow they are not really living their life. They're more like a sponge, and they don't know what they want. They don't know what they want. They can't say no. They are more of as if they are not there living vicariously. Another one would be this mechanical goodness.
And that, did you say we call that non-existence?
Non-existence.
Where you're not existing for yourself, basically.
Right.
You're existing for other people, through events. And there's a general lack of valuation for oneself. Sorry.
Yeah, no. The mechanical goodness, I mean, we talked a lot about this in other terminology, but this being a nice guy, people pleaser and helping out everybody. I mean, people pleaser can have other stuff, but being very helpful, that I want to be nice, I want to be good, and this is rewarded very often, but it doesn't come from some deep, genuine kind of choice. It's like a program. It's a mechanical, adaptive thing, and avoiding conflict, being nice, not stirring the boat, not saying no, and usually they are not never angry, but the anger gets stored somewhere. So mechanical goodness.
And it becomes resentment. They let other people walk all over them, as the expression goes, and then they become resentful that it happened. Deep resentment, passive negative emotion that is internal mostly.
Yeah, and that, as you know, I mean, that's not real. I mean, there's a lot of cost. I think we talked about quite a bit this mechanical goodness in other terminology in Circle of Being groups. Yeah, peacemaker and conflict avoidant, hard to say no, no boundaries. Another feature would be naivete, which is more like childlike. It's the child inside kind of remains there as we mature, and there is this thing like they can't believe that bad things can happen. They can't. It's hard to imagine that it can rain today and something. So it's more like a Peter Pan, a perpetual Peter Pan, which has a nice dose of idealism, uh, believing that world should be nice and everybody should be nice and we should all get along, and some kind of immaturity, childlike, undeveloped negative sides of centers, meaning they don't conceive that things can be turned otherwise than like perfect and idyllic.
Yes, whereas fear will think that at every turn there's an obstacle to be afraid of. Naivete doesn't consider obstacles. They don't exist. What's gonna, and oddly enough, there have been people who started successful businesses because somebody else would not have been able to overcome all the seeming obstacles to having a successful business. And some of the naivete goes and does it. And it works sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, they cannot imagine that people can actually mean them harm or that people can do certain things. It's almost like they feel like they are not from this world and this world is heavy. And
Another aspect of this is gullibility, just being gullible. And we all have this in different areas. We're gullible in one or more of the centers, and this is a dimension of naivete.
another feature would be Tramp feature. Actually, here Gurdjieff was saying that along with vanity, or in the system, that many people can have a feature plus Tramp or a feature plus vanity. And Tramp feature, if it is very strong, it becomes a real obstacle towards kind of the going deep into the system, into inner work. Anyway, so Tramp feature, it's like the feature is that nothing matters, doesn't matter. It's all relative, and nothing really matters. We're all going to die, and this or that, and some kind of inner teenage kind of rebellion and being loose, and usually this idea, this Tramp around values. So there are no values that matter. Nothing that is important matters. Also, this shows in it's trampy, meaning it's messy. The house is messy. Their clothes are messy. Things are in disarray. Bills are not paid. Finances are not considered. It's more like that it's almost like a resistance towards being grounded and pursuing something. Lack of commitment. It's
The fear. Tramp is afraid of commitment and afraid of responsibility. And I mentioned earlier that our chief feature will make the decision how to handle pressure. And the psychology surrounding a Tramp feature is to do nothing and to avoid responsibility, avoid commitment, because that's pressure and I don't want to deal with that. And it's an avoidance. And this is why it's often said that Tramp is one of the features that we're not born with. It's an adaptive psychological tendency in our personality, that we may have a tendency, in essence, somehow a kind of form of laziness that manifests in all the centers. We might be intellectually lazy, emotionally lazy, instinctive moving lazy, and therefore there's this inertia not to do anything. And then the time comes to do it and be responsible and be accountable, and it's too much pressure. We slough it off. Nah, I don't want, don't matter anyway, man. You know, and all this, and this becomes, and this isn't just the kind of, let's say the hippies in the 70s. It was fashionable to be trampy, to appear to be a tramp, someone who didn't care. They knew better. The system is bad. It's corrupt. We don't want to do, let's go our own way. Love, peace, be happy, this kind of thing. Tramp can also be a little different. It's where you basically you have no values. That's what it is. It's a psychological thing. Nothing, everything is of equal value, therefore nothing is of value. Nothing need be of value.
Very nice. And I think the last one we are going to talk today is a lunatic feature, which is the kind of the opposite of Tramp, meaning that one hyper focuses on something that becomes very, very important. So one goes like really deep into something, but missing the bigger picture. And it's kind of some kind of obsessive compulsive tendency. And I'm not talking about little washing hands and closing doors. It's going down the rabbit hole of something, and
Of everything.
of everything.
No, but someone with lunatic will go into the rabbit hole with everything. Yes,
Yeah,
and there's an insistence on the details and the
right.
we got to dig this hole all the way every time at the exclusion of other things.
Yeah, actually, I have a friend who, very nice man, but whenever he wants to buy something, like we got, okay, let's buy some rifle to go hunting, or let's buy a motorcycle. He just studies for like weeks and knows every little thing about everything and all the models that ever existed, and then it's paralyzing the thing, and he gets that, and then he gets the other one because it's special model, and it's really, I'm like, dude, you really went deep. So for one thing, it's a good resource.
A good resource, yes.
I mean, what's so wrong with that? I think I have that.
No, but that's interesting you asked that, Mike, because the fact is, all of these features, what are they representative of? They are representative of each specific forms of identification. Each feature is a manifestation, an external manifestation, and a psychological manifestation of identification. And each of us, when we're born, we are akin to a machine, a little. If you had, I don't know, 10 or 12 or 20 different devices, all designed to promote identification, but you want it in different variations, then that's what these features are. They're built into us, and we predictably manifest in this way and produce a certain kind of byproduct through our identification. And in the meantime, we're experiencing it as a feeling of identity. This is me. I must study all this. I must research all the motorcycles. I must get the best bargain. There's this insistence on detail, exactness, and there's a fear behind this too, of not getting it right, of missing something, yes, and the word lunatic is not accidentally chosen. It suggests extreme. It's extreme behavior, extreme identification. I remember there was one student in our school, and when he made his coffee, he liked to put 4 or 6 raisins in his coffee. And the teacher gave him an exercise. He said, "That's lunatic. That's lunatic. You're putting raisins in your coffee." I mean, it was just a small example. But this fellow insisted, you see, actually, it wasn't about the raisins. It was his insistence, and it was his habit. I must, every time I make a cup of coffee, put 6 raisins in my coffee. This kind of repetitive, this is why Mihai mentioned OCD. There's kind of an OCD characteristic. And in fact, a lot of people who have OCD, I'm going to put this forth as a possibility. If you diagnose them, they probably have a fair amount of lunatic. And it's not an accident that they're prone that way. And it's not a bad, see, this, we're talking about, it sounds like the most terrible feature right now that we're talking about, yes? And that's the kind of extremity that comes when we start talking about these features. It's not, it's just it's another feature.
Well, I think of myself, I have lots of that feature, and I can only think of kind of like the Matrix when Neo says, "Oh, I know Kung Fu now." That's kind of how I feel. I go down a rabbit hole and I go, "Oh, I know everything about this vehicle. I know everything about whatever it is," and I feel like I have an edge because of it. And is there, the world is a little bit bigger. Like I have more agency because of it, because of the time spent doing that. So I guess I failed to see how it's a bad thing, or maybe you're not framing it that way as a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. It's identification. And again, it speaks to the vanity of each feature. See, lunatic thinks it gives you edge, it gives you agency. It's a pretty good thing to have, pretty good quality to possess. Certainly better than Tramp, right? Or dominance, God forbid. I mean, this is what each of the features does, you see. And each of the features criticizes, there's sort of a family of features that criticizes the other family of features. And it's again, it can be hilarious to see this, but everybody feels they're right from their perspective. It's right for me not to care about anything. Who are you kidding? Why do I need to study all this stuff? Somebody else is going to do it. I've got a good lunar friend who'll do, or a good lunatic friend who'll do it for me. I don't need to.
So with the goal, what is the goal then? To not be I mean, can you still gain knowledge and not be identified with the thing that you're? I mean, because I
Yes.
become just with the work itself. I've had a few instances where I've lunaticked right down the fourth way rabbit hole, and I feel like it kind of moved me along a little bit for being able to just lose some time to studying. So what's the goal there?
Well, that's a great question, as is now a common expression. It's a great question, Mike. Uh, but let's see, and I want to answer it, but maybe Mihai wants to finish going through his little list, and then we ought to come back to that, because that is the question. That's the thing. What is this about? What does this have to do with consciousness or awareness? Why is this even spoken about in the fourth way? How's it related to our aim to awaken? Why is it important to know this and study this? Yes.
Yeah, and for Claudia, I touched on this mechanical goodness, Claudia. So I talked. So yeah, this mechanical goodness, good boy, good girl. I touched upon that as a feature. Well, from the point of view of, if there is no aim to awaken, then that is fine. There's no problem here. And then actually, I had a good friend of mine. He was a student in the school for a long time. He knew about these things very well. And you can see it on people. You can see he was actually a big a manager of a big gas company. And he had all these employees and truckers and all of this. And he would have interview with people. And he himself looked like a trucker, but he was steeped into this fourth way stuff. And he will see right away what's their feature, what's their weakness, what's this thing. He will say to some people, like, "Hey, you want a candy?" You know, he knew exactly where to touch them. And so you can use this like, okay, well, if you want some detail-oriented work, you need to find somebody who is good at that. Now, you don't want to have a Tramp feature person to be the manager or to do details. And then so every one of them is embedded in the human diversity and the human unconsciousness, and it doesn't matter. From the point of view of wanting to become conscious and go deeper into evolution, each one of these things, it is a compulsive, mechanical pattern of acting, of being relationally. We can't help it. And then when this comes, self-remembering is out of the window. So we are identified, and in that whole yeah, I'm spending a lot of time, and I even feel good about it. There's a strength in that, and one can be praised for that, and one can get benefits from that. So, but we are most asleep when we are into that. And now, of course, ideally, man, you want to buy a car, or you want to you want to invest. It will be good to study, man, to study a little bit, study about it. I mean, there's nothing wrong about that. Lunatic, gets really now deep into every detail of everything. So that's why it's not going to value, like Tramp. If one has strong Tramp feature, is not going to realize how important this knowledge is and how important this work is. Because it'll be like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's okay. And lunatic, it also still is going to put the same equal importance on every little shit, and is not going to value the work in the system. So Gurdjieff was saying that actually Tramp and lunatic, there are some kind of very interesting obstacles, because he was saying that one can, which is a strong statement. When I heard this first time, I was like, man, I don't like this. I am disqualified. He would say that a successful work on the fourth way on oneself will only start from the level of what he called in Russian obyvatel. Obyvatel, which meant good householder, being responsible, being able to be responsible, take care of oneself, maybe of other people too, have it all together, to have it together. Then otherwise it's dreamy and bullshit. And I mean, I didn't fucking have it together. I was dreamy and vanity and trampy and all of this, but somehow I stay with it. And only later I got it all more together. But that's what Gurdjieff is saying. There needs to have this maturity, a sense of responsibility, ability to commit, ability to value. But yeah, let's open it now basically to, we are just focusing now on showing this to you. See if you recognize this. We are going to have more meetings on this. The common question is, well, how can I change this? It was not possible to change this because we are the most mechanical here. So the work is to start to observe, discover what is our chief feature, and to try to accumulate, to observe it, bring more awareness to it, and remember ourselves in the middle of it, and sometimes refrain, resist the tendency. This is like a way where we are really falling asleep hard. So if we know it, then we can put aims around that. We are struggling with our own mechanicality.